Okay, so today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that, well, it's pretty sensitive, infidelity. Specifically, how it plays out, how it impacts a Christian marriage. Our main source material for this deep dive is a podcast episode it's called The Sunshine Inside. And the episode is titled Healing After Infidelity, a Christian Couple's Journey to Restoration and Forgiveness. Now, I know what you might be thinking, another deep dive on infidelity, but what makes this one so interesting is how it goes beyond just the surface. It really tries to dig into how faith and forgiveness kind of work together when you're facing something this heavy.
Right. Right from the start, the episode really emphasizes just how much pain infidelity causes in a Christian marriage. It's not just like breaking trust between two people, it's breaking a vow, a vow made before God. It's almost like another level of hurt gets added on top of everything else.
Yeah, I see what you mean. In other contexts, infidelity might be seen as like breaking a contract or an agreement, but here, it's almost like breaking a spiritual promise, and that's got to be way more intense.
Exactly. And what's really cool is they ask the listener a really direct question early on. It's like, have you ever had your trust broken? What emotions did that bring up for you? Did you feel lost, betrayed, or angry? It's like they're making space for you to connect with your own experiences even before getting into the specifics.
I like that, starting with vulnerability right away.
Yeah.
Now, the episode also goes into why infidelity happens, and it challenges some common assumptions. They suggest that a lot of times it's more about unmet emotional needs or, like unresolved conflicts rather than just a lack of love.
That's so key because it moves away from the simple idea that infidelity equals falling out of love. Highlighting those deeper issues, I think it encourages us to look beyond the surface and understand, like, the real complexity of what might lead someone to do that.
Absolutely. It's not about making excuses, but it's about getting a more complete picture.
Right.
Now, what really struck me was how much emphasis they put on responding to infidelity with faith, even when you're dealing with all this anger and hurt.
Yeah, they even bring up a Bible verse, James 1:19. It says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Basically, it's calling for a measured response, even when your emotions are going crazy.
And they tie that directly to communication. They see calm, open communication as like this radical act of love in this situation, even when it feels impossible. It's like they're saying, look, you have a choice, anger or faith, even a tiny bit of faith, to guide you toward a different path.
And that approach is like deeply rooted in the Christian belief in forgiveness and reconciliation. It's not about saying infidelity is okay, but it's about creating a space where healing and restoration could happen.
It's about making a conscious choice to act from a place of love and faith, even when everything inside you is screaming for something else.
Mhm.
But, the episode also acknowledges how tough all of that is, especially when you bring kids into the picture.
Yeah, they talk about the impact of infidelity on children, which is often overlooked. They even quote Ephesians 6:4. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up with instruction and admonition from the Lord.
Okay, so how do you interpret that in the context of infidelity? Because it seems like anger is kind of unavoidable in that situation.
Well, that's the challenge, right? Kids are super perceptive. They pick up on tension, anger, sadness, even if you try to keep the details from them. So that verse is like a reminder that even in the middle of this super tough situation, parents still have a responsibility to create an environment that's as emotionally healthy as possible for their kids.
So it's not just about keeping this specific secret. It's about being a good example, showing them how to cope in a healthy way, even when you're hurting.
Exactly. And then they go on to emphasize how important it is to get guidance from trusted sources like pastors, counselors, maybe other couples from their church who have gone through something similar. It's interesting how they point out confession as a part of healing.
They even mention Proverbs 28:13. It says, "He who conceals his sins does not prosper, but whoever confesses and renounces them finds mercy."
It's such a powerful verse because it talks about the burden of secrecy, keeping this painful thing hidden. The idea is that acknowledging the truth, even though it's so hard, opens the door to healing and forgiveness.
It's like shining a light into the darkness, letting your faith and your community help you through it. And that's where forgiveness really takes center stage in this deep dive.
Yeah, they really present forgiveness as like this super difficult but ultimately freeing thing. It's like it opens up the possibility of rebuilding and moving on, even after something so painful.
But it makes me think, what if someone just can't forgive? Like, what happens then?
That's a big question, and the deep dive doesn't pretend forgiveness is easy. They acknowledge all the raw emotions, the anger, the hurt, that feeling of betrayal. They're not trying to sugarcoat it. They're saying straight up that Choosing to forgive, especially when it feels so undeserved, it's a huge challenge.
It also makes me wonder about the practical side of things. Like, even if you can forgive, how do you even start to rebuild trust after something like this? Is that even possible?
I think that's where the deep dive could have gone a bit deeper. They talk about restoration, but they don't really get into the how-to of rebuilding trust. Like, what are the steps? Can you ever really trust the same way again? I think a lot of people struggle with those questions.
Right, probably a lot of people listening are wondering the same thing. Feels like a whole other deep dive waiting to happen. But going back to the episode, they do make a point of saying that forgiveness doesn't mean you have to stay in a relationship that's unhealthy or unsafe.
Right. It's about finding a way to move forward in a healthy way, with peace, no matter what happens with the relationship. It's about reclaiming your own emotional and spiritual well-being, whether or not the marriage makes it.
It's like choosing to let go of that anger and resentment, not for the other person, but for yourself.
That's a great way to put it. Something I was thinking about as we were getting ready for this deep dive is that the episode is really focused on heterosexual Christian couples. I think it's good to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Makes you wonder how these ideas of faith and forgiveness might work in different cultures, different religions.
For sure, like what counts as infidelity, how people see it, even the resources for healing. Those can be totally different depending on your culture and religion. I mean, in some cultures, infidelity might be a really serious sin with huge consequences, but in others, it might not be as big of a deal.
It's a good reminder that there's no one right way to deal with infidelity. Every person, every couple, their experience and how they heal will be unique.
And some cultures might focus more on community support during the healing process, while others might be more individualistic. Those are all important things to think about.
It's not about saying one way is right and one way is wrong. It's about recognizing that everyone's experience is different, and people cope with these tough situations in different ways. And that's why finding guidance and support is so important, whether it's a pastor, a counselor, a therapist, or even just a close friend. Having someone you can talk to who understands, who doesn't judge, that can make all the difference.
It's about finding people who will listen, offer good advice, and just be there for you while you process all those intense emotions.
And this deep dive also made it clear that a lot of the healing comes down to the choices you make. It's not about waiting for things to get better. It's about actively choosing to heal, whether that's therapy, leaning on your faith, or finding healthy ways to deal with your emotions.
And knowing that healing takes time. There's no quick fix. It's a journey, and there will be good days and bad days.
It's about being patient with yourself, letting yourself feel all those emotions, and remembering that even when you're heartbroken and disappointed, there's still hope.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so powerful. It's real about how tough infidelity is, but it also offers hope and resilience. It reminds us that even when things seem totally broken, there's still a chance to find wholeness and peace.
So as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive into healing after infidelity, what stands out to you as the most important takeaway? What's something you'll keep thinking about as we continue to explore this challenging topic?
Honestly, what really sticks with me is how even after such a huge betrayal, there's still that potential for healing, for growth. It's like a reminder that even when you feel completely broken, you can put yourself back together, maybe even stronger than before.
I'm right there with you on that.
Mm.
And the way the episode emphasized faith and forgiveness as these tools to get through it. It's not about pretending it didn't happen or ignoring the pain. It's more about finding a way to move on with, I don't know, maybe grace, compassion for yourself and the other person.
Yeah, like making that choice to break free from the anger and resentment, to find your own peace.
And that's such a powerful message, regardless of whether the marriage survives or not.
Exactly. Healing is a journey, not a finish line. Sometimes that journey means leaving the relationship, but it never means giving up on your own well-being.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about how the episode focused on heterosexual Christian couples. And it got me thinking about how different cultures and religions might approach this whole thing. Do you think there's like a universal truth about healing from infidelity, something that goes beyond those differences?
That's a really deep question. I don't know if there's a simple answer, but maybe one thing they all share is the need for empathy. Being able to see things from different sides. Whether you were betrayed or you strayed, to heal, you have to understand all the emotions, the needs, the circumstances that led to it.
It's about moving past judgment and blame and trying to really understand the human heart with all its imperfections.
And that brings us to a question I want to leave you with today. How can we, as individuals, as a society, create a space where we can talk openly and honestly about infidelity, healing, forgiveness, without all the shame and judgment.
Wow, that's a powerful challenge. It's about recognizing that infidelity is a human experience, something that affects so many people, no matter who they are, what they believe, or what kind of relationship they're in.
It's about building a culture of compassion and understanding where people can ask for help and support without being afraid of being judged or pushed away.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to think about that question. How can we create a world where healing from infidelity is met with empathy and support, not silence and shame? This is a conversation we need to keep having, and it starts with each one of us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.